All right, let's look back at history. On this day, October 2nd, 1971, the U.S. experienced its first nationwide dock workers strike when longshoremen on the East and Gulf Coast ports joined their West Coast brethren who had walked off the jobs just months earlier in July. 56 ports along the U.S. and Canadian western coasts and at least 24 others on the East and Gulf Coast dormant. The unions, on one hand, they were seeking better pay, but more critically, they were seeking to address declining membership and morale as increasing automation decreased the need for human labor. Sound familiar? Now remember, prior to the 1950s, most ships used a so-called break bulk method to move goods by individual units. It was laborious and time-consuming. But the adoption of the modern 8-foot by 20 to 40-foot shipping container meant that rather than unload by hand hundreds of thousands of individual items from the hull of a ship, docks now could only move 10,000 or so large containers from the ship to a rail car or to a truck, which would ferry those goods directly to a warehouse or a store where that unloading could be done on that end. That reduced the man hours needed at the docks, and because the containers were so large, only machines had the power to move them, and that reduced the need for any type of human muscle. After a decade of declines in employment levels, the dock workers said enough. They walked off the job, calling for protections against automation. The strike that started back in July 1971 had become a huge economic problem by the time the East Coast workers joined on October 2nd. The implications range from the serious, refusing to load military cargo needed for the Vietnam War, to the more mundane, such as, well, shutting off salt, rice, and toilet paper shipments to Hawaii. In fact, a 1971 New York Times article said toilet paper became so scarce in Hawaii, it turned into a status symbol, describing how a wealthy heiress received toilet paper as a housewarming gift after she bought a condo in Waikiki, or when a radio station held a contest with a grand prize of bathroom tissue that it cheekily delivered in a Rolls Royce. Now, things were so bad that by October 4th, the President of the United States, Richard Nixon, stepped in, invoking the Taft-Hartley Act to protect what he called the health and safety of the U.S. economy. Eventually, the strike was settled, with the longshoremen getting only about half of the pay increase they sought and none of the explicit protections that they had sought against automation. And that brings us to where we are today, where East Coast workers have decided to shut it all down once again, facing off not so much with the dock owners, but with the technology that threatens once again to further dwindle their numbers.